go. Welcome to the I Am Great podcast. I'm your host, Eugene Walker. And on the I Am Great podcast, we're just going to be finding people to tell their stories, their journeys on how they are accomplishing who they are today. The struggles, the adversity, everything they had to overcome to become great. I know it's hard for people to sit down and listen to an hour of other people talking, but play this while you're cleaning up. Play this while you're in the gym, or just play this while you're driving around. I think you'd really like it, so give it a listen. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to the I Am Great podcast. I'm your host, Eugene Walker, and got a very special guest, one of my family members. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Phelica Glass, the grief counselor.
The grief counselor.
Yes.
So, besides grief counseling, give some accomplishments that you're doing today, some things that you feel like make you you.
Oh, that's a heavy question. So, really, I think the biggest part about me is that I help people transition their lives. People go through some really rough times, whether it's about grief or finding a new career or kids moving out, whatever it is people may be experiencing. I'm here to help people change their lives
So you're good at talking to people.
all day long.
Okay. So like what are some like on the book accomplishments that you've accomplished? Like things that you can say, I did this, I did that. What are some things you're proud of yourself for doing?
So, one of my very first accomplishments that I always talk about is being the first in Kansas to win a scholarship to the Cosmosphere. So, I was a fourth grade student. That's where competition and drive really birthed for me, at knowing that I could do things that were great. And I had amazing principals and teachers who really supported me. And so I just continued that. So, my drive has really been about education. I have an undergraduate degree from Washburn here in Topeka. I have a master's degree from Tulane University of New Orleans, which was considered one of the top social work schools in the country. So that's really big for me. I'm also a fellow of the American Academy of Grief, which means that I've done some extensive studies to be considered an expert in my field. And so I think that that's phenomenal. Most importantly, I gave birth to 3 kids. That's amazing individuals. And I'm raising them in this crazy world through these crazy times and still find time to give of myself to other people.
That's great. So let's go to the past. So who was Phelica growing up? Like what was elementary like, middle school, high school? How was everything growing up?
Okay, so I think it's important to mention that I'm from a single parent home. So my mom was a teenager when she had me. I spent a lot of time with my great grandparent, and which for me was my great grandmother, and other people. But my mom raised me, so I always think it's important to let people know I was not one of those kids who was raised by everyone else other than my mom. My mom was a teenage mom. She really put her life into me, and so. As a kid, I feel like I would say that I was well mannered and very driven to just be something greater. So I grew up in the house of my great grandmother for a few years, and she used to wake me up every day. Phelica, you're not going to be a dummy, are you? And for me as an adult now, I see that as I see the question mark. You're not going to be a dummy. But then there was such a huge exclamation point for expectation. And so it wasn't about telling me what I was going to do or what I had to do, but about instilling drive. And so I believe that I really tried to be that. So I've always been an academic, always on honor roll, but I was rough around the edges too. So street mobbing, gang banging, carrying razor blades in my mouth, being put out of school or kicked out for fights. Did all of that. ROTC changed my life in high school. So it's where I learned to take my leadership skills and put them in adequate places so that I could be a great leader and help people change their lives as well.
So tell us some stories about the trouble with Phelica, man, because I never heard none of those stories. So we gotta hear some of those.
So I'll tell you that I got into a fight once, fourth grade, the same year I won that scholarship to space camp. But I had a thing about people bullying others. So there are kids who to this day will say that I was a bully. I never will claim that I was a bully. I say that people started things and I finished them. So there was this time this guy was picking on another friend of mine, someone I considered a friend, and I wouldn't let him. And so me and him fought. And this guy wrapped some double D batteries inside his hand, like taped them in his hand, like a double D battery in his hand to fight me because I was also so much bigger than everyone else. But that was probably the fight of my life in that classroom, standing up for somebody else, something that didn't have anything to do with me. So I got in trouble when I got home.
Mm-hmm.
You fighting stuff that didn't have nothing to do with you. You can't be doing that. But I felt like it was unfair for people to be picking on someone because they didn't have, or because of the way they looked. And so that was a big deal for me. I feel like I was bullied because I was 5'10" at 10. So kids wrote their stories about me. I was the Amazon till I was probably in middle school. And so I think for me, the stories were just about learning to stand up for myself. And I became who I was because I just refused to let people walk all over me. It was just kind of like I got tired of their stuff. So I started standing up to people.
Mm-hmm. So in middle school, did you have like, how was that? Like, you were getting in trouble a lot, or did it get better, or how was middle school for you?
So middle school, I would probably define as probably my most defiant time. Like, I probably was really good academically, participated in sports until I got kicked out for a fight. And then once you get kicked out for a fight, you can't go back. I got kicked out for a fight because a girl slapped me playing around outdoors at a track meet. And she slapped me, and so it was on. And we fought, and I got expelled. Like a 5-day suspension. I shouldn't say expelled. So I got like a 5-day suspension. I was allowed to come back to school, but I wasn't allowed to participate in track anymore. So I lost privileges. So I think in middle school, I think all of my academic years, I was an awesome academic. I think I struggled occasionally with peer issues, but nothing significant. Like, there weren't people coming to my house to try and talk to my mom about my behavior. It was just kind of like a meeting between the school. Once my mom knew, it was a wrap because my mom wasn't having it, and it was like, you better get your stuff together. And I decided to excel at some point. So coming out of middle school, my mom was pretty much tired of the calls from school. And she was just like, you're going to do ROTC. You're going to do it one semester. And that was because the staff at Highland Park knew who I was before I got there. And so they were like, that was their plan, was to get me in ROTC. So I would probably have less of a havoc on the school. So I did. It was just, you're just going to do what your mom said. But I fell in love with ROTC. And so I participated. I always say I made the uniform look good. So other kids who were friends of mine wanted to be in ROTC too. So we ended up doing ROTC together, and I participated the whole 4 years I was there.
So you didn't live in Topeka all your life. When did you move to Topeka?
So permanently, I moved here in 4th grade.
Fourth grade?
Yep.
And then what middle school did you go to?
So I went to Chase and Eisenhower.
I don't hear no Jordan in there.
No Jordan.
No.
I did not. There was not a Jordan. So I went to Eisenhower, and I went to Chase. So I did 7th grade at Chase and 8th grade at Eisenhower. Because when I was in middle school, it was just 7th and 8th grade. We were the last graduating class at Eisenhower before they included middle school into the 6th grade into middle school.
Oh, that's crazy. So you went to Highland Park, got into ROTC. So in high school, is that when that ROTC program is what changed you to become like not troubled or anything like that, or?
Yeah, for me, that was, it was about just having somewhere else to put my energy. So my friend crowd changed. I think it also changed my life when my cousin, I was 16, so probably in 10th grade. My cousin, who we're just a few months apart, he ended up being involved in a crime, and a young man that we were friends with was murdered in that crime. And that kind of took me out of street life in terms of just hanging with everybody, trying to be where the drugs are, trying to be wherever the banging was going on. That really took me out of that scene because it was life altering to have someone that you love be involved with the death of someone else that you love, because we were all really good friends. And that was life shattering for me, because then it became about redefining my life and making it about something more than the streets, because I saw that the streets could take your life too.
Man. And a lot of kids our age, well, my age, they glorify that, and they think that's the only way you can get respect. And I think it's just stupid, because you don't have to be out here living the toughest life. You don't have to be the toughest person in the room, because I heard this quote one time. It said, the graveyard and the jail cells are full of people with egos. So if you got an ego, it's not going to, sometimes it's okay to walk away. It does not make you soft to walk away. And
Absolutely.
it's sad to see kids want to impress other kids and then either end up dead or in jail. And me personally, I've had, it's sad to say, but like 4 people in my graduating class pass away, and not just passed away, like murdered. And it's like to think about, dang, I was sitting in class with them one day.
Hmm.
I used to be close with them, and now they're actually not here. And it's like you said, it'll kind of reroute you, because what you were thinking is cool is not cool anymore. Like
Right.
hanging around, just like trying to be a tough guy is not, that's not cool to me no more. Being a smart guy is cool to me.
Being
So
a smart guy is cool.
yeah.
Absolutely. So for me, with my cousin, I think the other part of it, Gene, is that we make decisions in like these split seconds
Mm,
that will change our life forever. In a split second, my cousin was involved in a situation that literally has stolen the rest of his life.
mm,
You would think that here I am. I'm 46 now. I just turned 46, and you would think that in all of those years, life had changed, and maybe he had gotten out of prison, but he's still sitting in prison for a crime he committed when I was 16 years old.
mm,
So we're talking, we're not talking about 10 years of your life. We're not talking about 15. We're talking about 30 years of his life,
mm,
um, ripped away, gone. Like he has grown up in the penal system,
mm,
literally. There hasn't been an opportunity to work a job or have kids or just even sit at the family dinner table, attend graduations of his nieces, nephews, cousins, even me. Like
mm,
all of those things were robbed because we were out here living a life that was fast, and it was kind of like, this is, it was, for him, it was a life that was introduced as this is what we had to do.
mm,
It wasn't. It really just truly wasn't. And so I'm with you. It's sad. We watch young people die every day because they're out here trying to make a name for themselves in the streets
mm,
instead of making a name for themselves in the way that they live their life of positivity
mm,
and or taking, owning companies at 12 and 14,
mm.
I think there are so many other options for our young people.
So getting into that, I think we don't see enough of that in the black community, and that the environments that these kids are growing up in, they're not seeing nothing like that. And to be honest, what really changed my course of actions was just being surrounded in a different environment. Pastor T.D. Hicks, he's the first person to take me out of town, took me to Denver to a men's conference, being able to stay in a hotel. I remember it like it was yesterday. They left freaking cookies on your bed. I'm like, dang, they don't do, like, I never been to nothing like this. And then
Hmm.
just being surrounded by him, the connections he's like has, and people he's introduced me to, like, dang, this person has $1 million. You telling me this person got $1 million? Just like, I didn't get to. A lot of kids don't get the opportunities that I had, and I think one of my biggest goals in life is to make sure I can do the same thing for another kid, take him out the hood and show him a better life. Because if they don't see that, they don't know it's possible. If I wouldn't have seen that, I wouldn't have known it's possible. I would have just been
Hmm.
looking up to people selling drugs and doing this all the time, instead of, oh wow, you can make some money in real estate, you can do this, you can do that. So I think that's one of the hardest things, is that our community, we don't get to see these things, and you can't want to be like something you don't see. So
Mm.
I think we need more integration of those images in our community, because we don't get to see that. And I think just the the environments these kids are growing up in, their parents are not at home with them. They're just running freely, allowed to do whatever they want,
Mm.
and it's just sad, because I know a lot of kids growing up like that, and a lot of kids in high school that are just thinking, yeah, this is cool, I'm gonna be this, I'm gonna be that, and it's not gonna end well for them, and it's sad to say. But so after high school, no, actually, what would you say was the biggest things you learned in ROTC?
Ooh, ROTC was amazing for me. So, one of the big accomplishments that I had in ROTC was that a drill team that I was on was one of the first teams to complete a blind drill competition. So that means our entire routine we did blindfold, not being able to see each other. And so one of the biggest pieces for me was learning that I could do anything as long as I had a team. And for me, that was about recognizing that I wasn't alone and I didn't have to do things alone, that it was okay to ask for help. It was okay to lean on people. It was okay to take someone with you. Like, so even though I was excelling at various things, my team was not any good if we all didn't go with each other and we didn't, support each other. And so I think that's something that I've lived with my whole life moving forward, is that I'm never in a situation where I'm totally alone. I'm never in a situation where I can't support or help someone else. And I think that was one of the greatest lessons I've learned in ROTC, that leaning on people isn't weakness. Helping other people is not weakness. The other lesson I believe I learned is that my voice mattered and how I use my voice mattered. That meant for me that instead of using my voice to put people down or demean people, to look down at people or whatever in a negative way, that I could use my voice to empower people, that I could use my voice to help people be better than the way they thought they were or the way someone else made them feel, that I could use my voice to improve the way someone felt about themselves, because that's what ROTC did for me.
So, out of middle school, elementary school, no, let's just say high school, what was the best moment of high school for you?
Um, I'm gonna have to say, ooh, I would either go with um, performing on stage in theater, because I was a part of the theater group, or becoming deputy commander of ROTC, so becoming second in command. Both of them were huge leadership roles for me. Being on stage where you're commanding the attention of everyone in a room. So for however minutes you're speaking, everyone is listening to the words that come out of your mouth. Oftentimes you may hear, like when you say your friends are home alone, they don't have parents around, there are probably times where they feel like no one sees them, no one listens to them. And in those moments on stage, everyone hears everything that you have to say. And that was important for me, is recognizing again that my voice mattered and that how I use my words mattered. Becoming second in command meant that people trusted me and that I was trustworthy. So that meant for all of the students that were in ROTC, if a command came down, if the first person in charge was the commander wasn't there, I was second in command. So that meant I ran the whole corps and was responsible. That meant that wasn't just about just showing up, but it was about doing the paperwork, taking the notes, helping people out, making sure people got where they needed to, holding peers accountable for not being in uniform. It included all of that. And I believe that that's where we all start. Like there are one or two moments in our life that redefine how we want to live life. And so for you, it was this trip out of town with Pastor T.D. Jakes. For me, it was these moments where T.D. Hicks. For me, it was about these moments where I got to be the center of attention and people heard my voice, and not necessarily about being the center of attention, but understanding the power of my voice.
Yeah, so do you have any fears or anything you had to overcome doing ROTC or theater?
I would say not necessarily fears. It was about learning self-control. So not being over the top, not being so far in the back that I didn't exist, but finding my middle ground and being able to be seen as part of, not the, right? So not necessarily wanting to be the first voice people heard or the first face people heard, but really learning how to create balance with my presence. So it wasn't about, oh my God, here she comes again, but it was about, let me lean in a little bit. I want to hear what she has to say.
So after high school, what did you do after high school?
Believe it or not, probably another fun fact you don't know about me. I actually got a scholarship. I went to McPherson College
Mm.
out in McPherson, Kansas on a cheerleading scholarship.
Really?
So I went to McPherson. I cheered for my first year of college, and I was a theater major. So I started out doing theater.
Mm. So what was some challenges in that first year of college?
Ooh, the biggest challenges were being in a town where the people didn't look like me or understand me.
Mm.
And some didn't care to understand me. So being in a college town where the only black students there were athletes
Mm.
was huge. Being in a town where people marched for the Ku Klux Klan out in public. Not being able to just go to the local store and buy hair oil or shampoo that I could use for my hair.
Mm.
Those were identity challenges for me, like really understanding that um, black people weren't everywhere. And as small as Topeka is, and you just don't think about it. I guess I just never had really thought about it. But that experience was probably the most centering for me in understanding that there are places where my presence isn't wanted because of the color of my skin.
Mm.
But there are also places where the presence of my skin doesn't matter because I can own it and stand in it.
Mm.
But at 18, I definitely wasn't in a place to walk that walk or talk that walk in the middle of, 2 hours, 2.5 hours from my family. So I chose to come home second year.
Mm.
So at the end of the first year, I was done. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore.
So what'd you do when you came home?
Went to Washburn. So
Went to
I lived
Washburn?
at home. Yep, I lived at home with my mom and my dad for a semester, maybe a semester, and then I completed my undergraduate degree at Washburn. I didn't cheer anymore. I didn't do theater. I switched to social work department. I was at this place where I was like, I need to really start. That was kind of where the switch comes on of, okay, what do I want to do with my life?
Mm.
And one of the things that's always been consistent for me is that people always felt like I was a good listener. And so social work it was for me. So I wanted to help people. I knew that I felt like a majority of my life that so many people let my cousin down,
Mm.
my cousin that I spoke about earlier. I remember workers being at their house and visiting and not intervening, right? Like there
Mm.
were some things that may have been going on that warranted an intervention. And I feel like because people allowed him to slip through the cracks, if there was something that I could grow up and do to help another young man, young black man be seen, be heard, be safe, I wanted to be a part of that. And social work was the way I could do that.
Mm. So after Washburn, you got into social work. How did you get into social work?
Really, it was just about just sitting down, talking to people about what I was good at, which was listening, and finding ways that I could be helpful. So I played with other degrees, like, oh, okay, I think I'll look at anthropology. And I was like, nope, I
What's
don't want to do that.
what's
The
intro?
study of people, the study
Oh.
of people's behaviors, and like culture
Mm.
is anthropology. And so I didn't want to do that. I looked at psychology, which again is a helping field, but psychology, in order to really have financial gain, you really need a doctorate degree.
Mm.
And I was like, man, I could be like old, which is like 28, 30, before I could really make any money. And I really needed to get a PhD. And I didn't know that that was the route I wanted. So social work for me was the better choice. I knew some really great mentors
Mm.
who had already been a part of my life who were social workers. Black women who were amazing individuals that people looked up to. That I saw them move rooms like they were power pieces in a
Mm.
room, and I wanted to be that. I wanted to be
So
that.
what is the difference between help me out,
So anthropology, the
and
study of
psychology? What's the
yep. So
difference?
culture is one. So looking at the different like cultural pieces of people,
Mm.
and then psychology is the breakdown of the brain. So understanding how the brain works. Social work takes all the aspects of a person's life,
Mm.
and we help people manage life. So psychology is about the brain functioning, and they pretty much only look at how the brain functions. With social work, for me, clinical social work, which is what my master's degree is in, it's about helping people understand their mental illness, learn behavioral responses and coping skills to the mental illness and helping them be able to thrive in their communities and in their families. So I can't just look at you as a illness. I have to look at how your illness impacts your ability to function in your own world. And then we try and make changes to help you function at your best.
Mm-hmm. So, who were some people that you looked up to? You mentioned a few mentors. Who were those people that you just looked up to and kind of wanted to resemble those actions?
Yeah. So, one of the people that I looked up to, and I still look up to today, is a beautiful soul by the name of Harriet Johnson. Her name is Dr. Harriet Johnson. And Dr. Johnson was in my life when I was in middle school over at Eisenhower. She was a dynamic communicator in that you couldn't get anything past her. She was attentive. She spoke to you, not at you, and still continues to do that today. You know, she invested time and patience into me as an individual, recognizing where I may struggle, but never using my struggle as a place to put me down or discourage me, but finding it, identifying it as an area that needed improvement, and then using the things that I was good at to make me better. So I felt like she always pushed me in the right direction, always had conversation with me, never was a person who pushed me away, but always made time for me. Another person is Pamela Johnson Betts. She's also a social worker, and Pam is like those women that you see on TV where everyone goes and like sits at their feet and want to hear what they have to say. That's Miss Johnson. Like she is still everything. Like her words are soft spoken, but they're so powerful. She was one of my mentors when I was in the social work program at Washburn, doing supervision under her while she was at Chase Middle School. And being there now as an adult, helping students and watching her mentor and change young people's lives. Again, being a person who spoke words of kindness to kids, who helped them see themselves and not necessarily see them as a problem, but help them with problems. So it's really about how both of these women spoke to people and encouraged people. So they didn't see me as, oh my gosh, here comes Felicia again. They was like, Felicia, hey, you know, like they were welcoming towards me. And for me, those are definitely two of the greatest women that I've encountered in my life.
Okay. So, getting your undergrad and getting into social work, what was the hardest challenges you had to overcome?
Test.
Test?
I don't like exams, but you have to test, and test. For me, so I think academics as a whole comes easily to me. So I can glean the information. That's not a problem. Testing over information sometimes can be difficult, and so really learning different study practices, understanding how to break down language so that I can exclude some of the potential answers, so that I can make the best choice if I don't know the correct answer. But really just learning new study skills, I think, was probably the biggest challenge to testing, was what things do I need to know in order to make this exam work for me.
So, after college and then social work, what was the journey to getting your master's? When did you know you wanted to go further?
You know, I think it was just, you know, I was working as a social worker in a nursing facility, and I think the salary, I might have been making like $28,000 a year, 32 maybe. Again, I didn't have children, so it's a lot of money when you don't have kids. It's just you and an apartment, a car, not a lot of expenses at the time, but I knew that I wanted more and I wanted to be able to do something different. So really going to Tulane had been one of my dreams. I had wanted to go to Tulane since I was in high school. It was close to home, which is Mississippi. So I could go to school and connect with my family that lived in Mississippi still. And their program was clinical. So their program would give me the opportunity to get a master's degree. With my academic skills, I was able to apply for advanced standing, which meant that all of my major coursework I had a B or better in. So I didn't have to take some classes that were part of the master's program. So instead of doing a 2-year program for my master's degree, I was done with my master's degree in 10 months. So it was really opportunity. I applied late. It was
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like I woke up one day and was like, I'm going to grad school and I'm moving to New Orleans. And my mom was like, you're doing what and when and how? And I was like, I'm applying. And I took my application to church one day, had the pastor and the prayer team pray over it. I shipped it off, and it was late. Like I literally had missed the enrollment deadline, but I was accepted into the program, and I was advanced scholarships to attend. And that was all she wrote. It was like, I'm in like planned. I literally got an apartment with a sight unseen, like just going through the newspaper. It was such a thing at the time. Going through the newspaper, finding an apartment. Was like, I'm just gonna pick this. It's outside of the city. I'm about 20 minutes away. I have my own car. I can do this. And I had packed up my house and had my uncle drive me to, and his wife, my aunt and uncle, they drove me to New Orleans, dropped me off, and that was the story.
Mm-hmm. So did you have your kids after you got your master's?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So they were immediately after. Actually, I graduated December 14th from grad school, and I found out I was pregnant with twins December 24th on Christmas Eve, just 10 days later.
Oh, so you was having some graduation fun.
Some holiday fun, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So after you got your master's, what was your journey after that? What happened after you getting your master's and having your kids?
Really, Gene, I would have to say that the first part of it was traumatic, and that I graduated. Immediately after graduating, my mom had a stroke on her front steps. Ultimately, changed her life forever. Um, because it was also just a few short months after my brother passed away. So my brother died while I was in graduate school. I came home to be with my mom. Literally 3 days after I got home, my mom had that stroke on her front steps. 10 days later, I'm in the hospital visiting my mom, and I doubled over in the hospital, found out I was pregnant with twins, which is why I had been sick. And my pregnancy went awry. My mom was in the hospital my whole pregnancy. I was only pregnant for 24 weeks. I had those twins super early, so they were born 16 weeks early. So a lot of trauma is what I would say. And then I figured out that I had to survive. It was just kind of like quitting wasn't an option. The twins were in the NICU 99 and 107 days. Probably the most, outside of losing my brother, the most traumatic thing I've experienced in my life, even to this date. But it became about perseverance and my ability to just set new goals every day, whether it was today, I just got to get up, I got to see my babies, and I got to make sure I can put food on the table, keep a roof over their heads. So initially there wasn't a direct path, it was just working. And I worked at a couple of agencies doing child welfare. So I was doing case management work with the master's degree, and still making very little money, 36,000, 38,000. Doing some of that, figured out that I liked case management, but I sucked at communication skills. So one of the agencies that I worked for invested in me, and they had a lady come in. Her name is Roxanne Emmerich Davis. And Roxanne came in and did one-on-one communication skills with me. And she spent about 8 weeks just teaching me how to communicate with people and make people not feel offended by my directness. So it wasn't about what I said, it was always about how I said it, right?
And I think I want to slow you down a little bit.
Uh-huh.
So I think that's one of the things I struggle with too, like the communication skills. But I want to jump back a little bit. How were those days of that year or two maybe that when your brother passed away, then your mom having a stroke, then you finding out you're pregnant? How were those days, and how were you feeling in those days, and how did you get how did you get past those days?
Gene, I would honestly say my faith. I don't have, like, when I look back on it, I don't think there was anything unique about me that got me through those days. I believe that we all, we either have it or we don't, in terms of faith and resilience. Faith and resilience. You're either built to be resilient, which is flexibility and ability to grow in extreme circumstances, or you have faith. I definitely have faith in my time in New Orleans. I always tell people it was often that it is the time period that I was closest to God,
Mm.
meaning that I study God's word. I'm a faith believer. I believe in Jesus Christ. I believe that with him, all things were possible. So I want you to know that this is also right after 9/11. So 9/11 happened while I was in grad school.
Mm.
My brother died a month later, 3 days after my own birthday. And then my mom had a stroke 3 days after I graduated high school, after I graduated with my master's degree. I had those twins again 4 months later. I had those, well, 5 months later, I had those twins. And I don't know that I could have done it without family support. Where it seems like I didn't have any, I probably had a whole lot because I had a whole lot of people who prayed for me.
Mm.
Um, I remember having a girlfriend who would go to me with my doctor's appointments. If my then boyfriend, who I eventually married him, who if he couldn't go, she'd go with me, and just having somebody that I could lean on and trust,
Mm.
that wouldn't judge me, that would let me cry if I needed to cry. I don't know that I spent many days crying because I was in survival mode, Gene. In terms of just, I couldn't, I could not bring children into this world not being able to succeed.
Mm. Go ahead.
Just couldn't,
Mm.
right? My mom was in the hospital, so my mom literally had to learn how to walk and talk again.
Mm.
My mom had to learn my name again, how to spell it, how to say it. I literally spent the first few years of my kid's life buying my mom the same Christmas gifts I was buying my kids because she needed to learn how to read again.
Mm.
I can only attribute it to my faith.
Faith. So, what would your advice be to someone that's probably going through something similar and they don't have maybe the resilience, the strength, or the faith to maybe get through it? What would you tell them to do?
Lean in on the people who love you.
Mm.
Lean in on, I mean, literally, the strength of other people can get us through if we lean in. A lot of times people spend so much time alone or feeling like, well, I don't want to bother such and such. They got all their own stuff. Or I know people say to me, girl, you got kids, you got a business. Like, I ain't got time to be calling on you. You ain't got time for me. There are people in this world who will make time for you.
Mm.
And people who love you genuinely always have time for you. So lean in on them. I can't give you faith,
Mm.
right? I can't give you resiliency. You've either been built for it or not. But I can tell you that there's someone that you're probably overlooking who is standing there just waiting for a chance to jump in the ring and hold your arms up for you so that you can get a good breath for the next round.
Mm. All right. So, you said you're doing social work, and then what was the lady's name again that came and helped you?
Her name was Roxanne Emmerich Davis.
Mm. And how much do you think having that training, that one-on-one, how much do you think it boosted your skills?
100,000%.
Mm.
I credit her, and I actually, it's so funny because I recently had an opportunity to be in a room with her, and I had not been in a room with her since we had that work together.
Mm.
And I had an opportunity to look her face to face and tell her thank you because the skills that she gave me about listening, and not just listening for what I want to hear, but listening to a person's feelings and emotions and where they are and being able to respond to that are the things that transitioned me to be a great therapist, and even more so a dynamic speaker. It allows me to be able to deliver what people need without them feeling offended or hurt or like I didn't see or hear them.
Mm. So, after doing social work, talk about the working and raising your kids at the same time.
Mm-hmm. So really, my kids are why I have a private practice. In case management, it can be long days, long nights. I leave the house at 6 a.m. So at this time, you're leaving the house before it gets dark, before the sun comes up, and you're home when it's dark. And I would miss the majority of my kids' days. So school starting out, I might miss getting them there, or my husband at the time would, be the one doing primarily all of their care. And I missed that. And so there were some situations that came up in my career path that forced me to be at home. I got fired twice back to back for things that were unrelated to me, but
Okay, we can't just you can't just skip over those things. You gotta break those stories down. So the first time, what happened?
so the first time I was fired, I'm actually legally not able to discuss, but I can say that I was accused of doing some things that I had not done. And being a person who believes in standing up for herself, I wholeheartedly fought that battle to make sure that my career path could stay on track. Because as a social worker, I'm licensed by a body, and so you cannot work literally with your licensure if or you have consequences if your license is called a question. So the second time, really, it was ego. I was working for an agency, and it was a family owned company, and the gentleman who was in a room with me doing a sales pitch, he misquoted some numbers in the sales pitch. We were getting people to move into this like an adult's assisted living. And I was the director of social services for this agency. He misquoted some prices. I corrected the prices, which had literally just changed like 48 hours before. I corrected the prices, and the next day I came in and I was let go because Kansas is an at-will state, and I was told that I embarrassed him, and so I was let go. So at this point, this was the second time I was sitting at home, twiddling my thumbs, taking care of my family, but couldn't provide for them. So my husband at the time owned a business, and I mean a good business. So he was a provider, but being who I am, I also have these skills and these trades. I want to provide too. And so I decided I was going to make some quick money. So I threw together what's considered a continuing education unit. So every social worker has to take so many hours of continuing ed. So I was like, I'm going to design a training. I sat down one day at my computer, designed a training, and started advertising it on social work groups, and was like, hey, I connected with BSRB and NASW, which is our National Association of Social Workers here in Kansas, and was like, hey, I got this training I'm willing to offer. I charge people like $50. Come sit in a room while I talk to you, right? And I went to that training, and I probably made $250 or $300 that day for a 3-hour training. And in that room was a young man named Charles Vickers. And he asked me while we were on break, he was like, you have all of this knowledge and you're very skilled. Is there a reason why you're not doing therapy? And I was like, you're funny. Like, I would love to do therapy, but like I can't afford to pay anyone for that number of the cost that it costs for supervision. At the time, supervision was like $100 an hour, and I needed 3,000 of them. I didn't have that, right?
So you have to have, you said 3,000 hours of supervised work
Yep.
to become a therapist?
To become a clinical therapist able to work on my own.
Oof.
Yes, it was rough. So I was like, there's no way I could afford it. And so what he did was he was like, hey, I believe in you. Like, person's never met me before other than this day. He was like, I believe in you. I think you should come and I'll do supervision for you. I'll charge you $25 an hour to come and do that supervision. And I have a place you can rent if you want to come and rent it. I have an office you can use. And I was like, what? And who? And like, I don't even know you. But I scheduled an appointment. I went in, I met with him. I took a gamble on myself. My husband at the time, he invested in me by paying that first deposit and the rent. And he was like, happy birthday. So I opened my private practice on my 30th birthday, and it's been up and running ever since.
So you created a training seminar, and nowadays a lot of people are doing that, and a lot of them are good, a lot of them are bad. And what is your opinion on the training culture? And since you've done it, do you think it's a scam? Because that's what we're running into nowadays, because everybody wants to sell information. Everybody wants to do things without being properly qualified. So what is your opinion on the training culture now? Not just when you did it, but like looking at it now.
So, one, I think anything can be a scam if we don't do our homework. So, yes, are there some corporations that find a quick way to produce material and sell it to people? Absolutely. That includes certifications and PhDs. You know, you can buy anything over the internet at this point. But I also believe that there are some quality organizations who put together quality trainings that are about the betterment and improvement of professionals. So, at whatever level people are working at, I think there are great organizations out there. I think people need the continuing education. So, I don't believe that I can be a therapist and I've accomplished to a place where I no longer need to learn. And or as long as people in the world are changing, as a clinician, I should always be learning. I should always be reading, or sitting somewhere where someone else has done the studying and they want to share the information. A lot of times, CEs are really just that. Either they're required for your profession, or they're something that someone has taken interest in that they are wanting, like this download of info, but they don't want to do all the work of doing the research. So for people like me who write continuing ed, I just wrote a continuing education that I was asked to write actually for an organization here at Stormont Vale. They reached out and was like, "Hey, we understand you teach this course. Could you write a training for us?" Absolutely. Could I package it to sell? I could, because they basically did. They recorded me doing the presentation, and they'll drop it on their training site and continue to make money from it, I'm sure. Um, so I think that people are finding ways to make money. I think it's our responsibility as the person buying it to make sure that it's quality work and that it really is going to help us grow.
So, have you completed the 3,000 hours?
Absolutely.
Okay, so yeah. So
Yep.
talk about that journey and how hard was it to do all that and still raise your kids completing all those hours?
Yeah. So really, that just became about my work day. So those hours were just about the time. So 3,000 hours, I did that in 2.5 years, almost 3 years of time. And that was just about the number of people I could sit with. So imagine spending 3,000 hours with various people serving them. We spend a lot of loose hours, right? So if I took 3 hours away from my TV time a week, that's 3 hours that I could spend in front of a client, or three clients, really. So it was about the face to face time with clients. It was about studying and knowing my practice more, like what skills I needed, how I could help people improve their coping skills, which meant I need to learn about their coping skills. I think that it was not as difficult because I got to define the time. I got to do it on my terms. So if I wanted to go to work Monday through Friday from 8 to 5 for 3 years, I could. I chose to work 7 to 5, Monday through Thursday, and never work Fridays again, opening my private practice. So my private practice now, if you catch me working on a Friday, it's by choice, and somebody's paying me a whole lot of money to get out of bed.
So when you were in training, did you work more hours than you do now, or?
Yes.
So talk about that sacrifice for wanting something later and delaying the gratification and grinding, even though it's not going to pay off in that day. How was those days feeling, even though you're like, man, my friends are going out, but I'm still here working. How did you feel, and how did you stay so disciplined to get it done in two years?
Yep. So that 2.5 years was truly about that. It was about meeting the deadline. So it was about mapping it out. So no one, I suggest no one just says, okay, I'm going to do 3,000 years and don't have a plan, 3,000 hours and not have a plan. It was about planning it out. Okay, here's what I needed. Here was my family goal. So one of the things I talk to people about now around setting boundaries is, what do you want to prioritize first? So for me, completing the hours wasn't my first priority. Spending time with my children and not missing their events at school was my priority. So for me, I planned my family first and what they needed. And then I planned my practice around whatever I had available after I met the needs of my family. I am fortunate that I had the ability to do that. I think anything worth having is worth working hard for, and time doesn't become an issue. So for me, it was never about the time frame, other than the state required me to get it done within 3 years. So I had to have it done no more than 3 years, but I couldn't complete it in no less than 2.5 years, right? So I needed to have a plan. And so for me, it was about balancing what my family needed, and then how could I still meet this considered a professional goal on time. And so it was about planning that out. It was about making sure I got good rest. not overdoing things, because I think a lot of times we pour ourselves into stuff and we can overdo it and burn ourselves out. So for me, it was about just creating that balance. I think that you're right, that we do get to a place where we forget that we're sacrificing something right now for something greater later. And for me, the greater later was once I could practice on my own without supervision, I didn't necessarily have big brother or big sister looking over my shoulder other than it being an insurance company. It was about I am a full-fledged medical practice, and I could teach other people how to have a medical practice. And if I didn't want to work this week, I don't have to. So just recently I was able to take 7 days off and not worry about clients and not worry about turning the clock on or opening the calendar for a week. That to me was worth the sacrifice.
So talk about being fired and then going to work for yourself. How does those two things make you feel? Like knowing that you were working for these companies that treated you unfair, but now you are your own business, and how does that make you feel? Does it make you feel powerful?
I am powerful. I definitely am that. Um, but the bigger part of it was recognizing that we spend as human beings. We get two choices. We can spend our life making someone else rich, or we can spend our life making ourselves rich. I chose to invest a short amount of time making others rich so that I would learn the things I needed to in order to make me rich. Now, some people might say, oh, you're not rich because I still pay bills and I still have debt. But I am rich in time. I'm rich in emotional freedom. I have the potential to make however much money I want to make based on how hard I want to grind. So I think that, going from working a job where someone was paying me, let's say at the least probably $19 an hour. I was probably making that when I was 19 working for the Coast Guard. So from that to having an income where people ask me what my rate is, and I can tell them, I'll come and speak for you, but it's $300 an hour, or it's $400 an hour, or you know what, I'm gonna need an honorarium of 1,000.
What's that mean, honorarium?
Means it's money they're gifting you, and I don't pay taxes on it.
Oh,
Right. So I need to know that I don't have to, at this point in my life, I've created a path where I get to set the price of what it's worth to get me to show up. I think that's well worth the investment that I made in that 3 years of getting up, doing the grind, doing what I needed to do to be my own boss.
so at what age did you finish those 3,000 hours?
I was 28.
28? That's pretty young. So
No. 33.
33?
33. So I was 30 when I started my practice, and 33. So now I was under supervision, but I still have my own business. So I opened that business at 30. At 33, I was able to operate that business without a supervisor or someone providing clinical supervision for me. And then 2 years after that, I was able to start offering supervision to other people.
Really?
Yep.
And then you charge them for the supervision?
I charged them for supervision.
That's pretty cool. So you mentioned you were previously married. Is that a topic you're open to talking about, and how everything happened and how you got remarried, or is that nothing you don't want to talk about?
No, I'm an open book.
So when did you get divorced?
So I was probably 29, I believe, when I got divorced. Was I? No, 39. So I don't know how old I was. Golly. I can tell you this: the twins were 7. Janae was probably 5, so 9 and 7. So we had been married 8 years. By the time we divorced, we had been married 9 years, but we had been together a majority of my life. So he was my high school sweetheart. We grew apart, came back together, married, had kids, and our life was really the church. And so I tell people who ask about that marriage is that we lost our marriage to the church. We were busy doing church work, not taking care of our relationship and our marriage. And so we lost ourselves in other things, other people, just separated literally because we were busy doing church work and not taking care of our family and our relationship. We were taking care of our family, but not our relationship.
And getting divorced, how did that affect you?
I felt like a failure.
Mm-hmm.
In the church, you're supposed to be able to pray about it. Did you really give that to God? How we talk. So I truly felt like a failure. I felt like I let my children down. I became what I considered to be, I I feel like I became a statistic, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was like I lived my whole life defeating all of the odds, right? The kid that, you're a single parent at home, you're a female, you're black, you got all these strikes against you. And then here I am, the first to graduate high school, the first to go to college, the first to get a master's degree, the first to own a business, and then I'm divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was difficult for me. Um, but it was a decision that I was the one who asked for the divorce. I felt like I just wasn't getting my needs met. My children weren't getting their needs met, but I feel like he was a really great guy. Just we lost ourselves in our church.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think maybe after a few months, 5 or 6, I came to a place where I started to redefine me and became happy with